Now, Nick, you'd like to be called Nick, I gather.
Yes, that's correct.
And you can see me, can you?
Yes, I can.
And obviously you can hear me, and we can hear you.
Yes.
You're at home, are you?
I am in my computer room. I'm sorry I can't be with you all.
Well, so are we, but these things happen. You're talking to a full room here, if you can picture it, as full as we are able to be under current restrictions. And yesterday there were something like 400 people during the day watching beyond this room. So that's who you're talking to. And Ms. Richards will ask you some of the questions once Mary has given you the oath. So, Mary, would you please swear Nick in?
Please state your full name.
Nicholas Sainsbury.
And repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely.
I do solemnly, sincerely.
And truly declare and affirm.
And truly declare and affirm.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Good morning, Nick. Can you see and hear me?
I certainly can. Thank you very much.
Nick, you have severe haemophilia A, diagnosed when you were a baby.
That's correct, yes.
And in terms of the treatment that you received in childhood before you went to Treloar's, was that largely in Kingston upon Hull?
Yes, and also the Oxford Haemophilia Centre. I went down there for several reasons. When I was very young, we didn't even have cryoprecipitate. I remember even now having plasma at the age of 5 and getting reactions to that. And then I think I was about 6 or 7 when I had my first dose of cryoprecipitate. And of course at the time that was a wonder drug.
And before you went to Treloar's in 1974, do you know whether you were treated with factor concentrates or was your treatment solely plasma and then cryoprecipitate?
I think it was almost entirely plasma and then cryoprecipitate. The only exception I can remember offhand up to 1974 was when we went on a holiday to France. And I think my parents were given 2 or 4 doses of concentrate just in case of an emergency, which thankfully we didn't need.
Now, you then joined Treloar's in 1974 at the age of 11.
Yes, that's right. And the reason that happened was I was attending the junior school at home, which coincidentally was right opposite our home. The problem was I was never there because of bleeds into my left knee. By about before I went to school, I think I missed a total of about 1.5 years of school with my knee. I was in Oxford on traction for 8 weeks. I was in Hull Royal in traction and plaster for 6 weeks, and then I had my second hernia cleft palate operation, which bled profusely for several weeks. So I missed probably most of the last year to 18 months. And we happened to mention this when we were down at Oxford to Dr. Charles Richter, and it was him who told us about Treloar. So we got an appointment, went down to see it, and although I didn't particularly fancy being so far away from home, and my parents didn't like it either, it was Hobson's choice because it was the only way that I saw that I would get an education and have the medical support that I needed on the site. So that's how I get there.
And you remained there until 1980. We'll look at some of the records in relation to your treatment at Treloar's in a few minutes, but more generally, what are your recollections of receiving treatment at Treloar's? How often, what kind of treatment, and where would you go to be treated?
Well, when I joined, of course, it was purely a boys' school, so we weren't mixed, so we had our own sick bay. We'd go up the slope of this sick bay, and we would either have a transfusion of cryoprecipitate, they would put it on a drip and let it go, or if it was during the day, they tended to take us to the local Lord Mayor Treloar Hospital, which was about 3 miles away, and we'd be trekked there. And I've got memories of us being kept in there in a few days, as well as being kept in the sick bay at Treloar's. But those were probably the first couple of years, and then I think we gradually started to get the factor VIII concentrate. At first, it seemed okay. I did read the warning label on the bottle, and it said, warning, this product cannot be guaranteed to be free from viral infection. And I said to one of the haemophilia nurses, I said, what does this mean really? He said, oh, take no notice. He said, it's just there for legal purposes. It's because it's from America, so I thought nothing more of it. And we had an outbreak of hepatitis B, I think in the autumn of 1975. And woke up, it happened with the day of the school medical. I woke up and my friend, we looked at him, it was yellow, bright yellow. We didn't know what happened, we joked about it a bit. But it transpired that him and about 15 other boys had contracted hepatitis B. And we were all sort of, what's going on? But the only information we were ever given was when the headmaster stood up at the mealtime and said, I understand that some of you are worried about this hepatitis that's been going around. He said, I've been told actually not to worry. There were 2 types of hepatitis, the fatal kind, serious, and the non-fatal, or mild type, and you've got the mild type, so there's nothing to worry about. And that's all the information we're given. But it was disturbing to see that the boys affected, for a long time afterwards, they had to hand their plates in to the canteen staff, and all their cutlery and crockery, it all had, I think, a red spot in the middle, and they had to hand that over in front of everybody. And I just thought that was awful.
And your recollection in your statement was that this hepatitis B outbreak was around 1975, 1976?
I think it was the autumn term of 1975. It was, I'd been there about a year, I think, when it happened.
Other than your own choice in reading the product leaflet and the response that you then got from the haemophilia nurse, and the information you've just reported being relayed by the headmaster, there are 2 types of hepatitis, the fatal and non-fatal, this is the mild form. Was any other information ever given to you at Treloar's about any risks of being treated with concentrates?
No. When we did move over on to concentrate, I do remember asking, do you still will we get reactions to it like we have with the cryoprecipitate? Because I said that's horrible. And the nurse or whoever it was said, no, you won't, because this product, this stuff, it's a lot purer.
And I think you've got recollections of being treated by a range of doctors at Treloar's. You've identified Dr. Kirk, Dr. McCardy, Dr. Arenstan and Dr. Wassef in your statement.
Yeah, Dr. Kirk, Dr. McCardy. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, Dr. Wassef and Dr. Arenstan.
And then after you'd been there 3 or 4 years, we understand in the late 1970s after the two schools had merged and it had become a co-educational establishment, that the haemophilia centre moved to be within the school itself.
Yes,
Can
well,
you
as I
recall
say,
that?
yeah, well, it was much better then. You just had to walk up the corridor through the doors and you were there. Yes, it was better. It was on the site. You'd go in, you'd report for clinic after breakfast, or the evening clinic, or if something popped up during the day, you would just have to go up and tell them, and they'd make arrangements for you to be treated. But yeah, it was even better. Yeah.
And did there come a point where you were treating yourself?
Yes, that started for me in 1979. I mean, the self-infusion program was pretty new at that time, and they were teaching us in batches of 4, and we had a little chat with was it Dr. Wassif, when cleanliness, when to have a bleed, how much to have, and all this. But there was no real concern over the safety of the blood mentioned at all, none at all, as I recall. And then I proceeded with the home infusion training. I found it very difficult. One of the reasons was I had a severe brain hemorrhage at a very young age. One of the main things it did was affect my eye and hand coordination, and that's been a problem throughout my life. So to get hold of a small needle, hold it, and then twist it round and get it into a vein and do all the other, it was a nightmare. And it took me a long time, and if it hadn't been for one particular person, I don't think I would ever have achieved it. And that was a lovely nurse called Annie. She would sit with me time after time, and she even put a tourniquet on and did a needle into her own arm, and I did one in my own arm at the same time, so we did it together. That's how dedicated she was. But I did feel a bit under pressure because I'd booked to go on a school trip to Canada in June of 1979, and I was a bit annoyed to be told that you had to be able to treat yourself in order to go, because there was nobody going with us who could administer factor 8. And I thought, well, that's a bit strange. Obviously, you just don't want to pay for a nurse to go with us. But I managed it. But yeah, I found it very difficult. But I got through it, and it was really thanks to that nurse.
And when you did self-treat, if you felt the need for treatment, can you talk us through what you do in terms of getting the product? You'd go to the centre on the school.
Yes, what I'd do is if I felt a bleed coming on and it wasn't clinic, I would go up to the centre, just check in with the nurse on duty, say I've got an elbow bleed, and then I would go into the room. There would be a set of scales on the floor, weigh myself, and I would look at the chart that we had on the wall, so many kilograms against this 20% raise, and we were told to use a product, the combination of bottles, not all one product, but use a combination that would get us as close as possible to, 550 units. So it did vary a little bit as to which I would use. And then I would fill in a treatment slip saying what I'd done, give it to the nurse, and I would be told to see the doctor at the next clinic appointment, which was either in the evening or the next morning.
And in terms of which concentrate you would be self-treating yourself with, was there we've heard other witnesses describe a fridge and going to the fridge and taking a concentrate. Was that your recollection, or did it happen differently in your time?
No, I mean, as far as I remember, once you'd been trained up on it, you once you see the doctor at the clinic, or, as I say, reporting, you were just left to get on with it. I mean, if you had problems, somebody would come and help you. But the whole idea was, obviously, that they were trying to prepare us for life after school and wanted us to just get on and be able to do it ourselves. But, I mean, I have to say, there was 4 of us trained at a time, And we did help each other out. I mean, I can remember one occasion, by coincidence, all four of us turned up with a very bad elbow bleed. And I was absolutely doubled up. And one of the boys, he was the same, but he went round and helped all three of us before doing his own. And I've never forgotten that. I thought, you know, that's such a selfless act from someone who was in so much pain himself, you know. So, I mean, you know, we did help each other.
I'm going to ask you to look with me at a few of the records from Treloar's, Nick.
Yeah, sure.
So, Shomik, could we have, first of all, TREL 5071_022? So I'm not sure whether I've given you the wrong reference. I'm sorry, it's my own handwriting, I can't read. TREL 5074_022. So we can see, Nick, this is a letter, December 1975. It's from Dr. Kirk. And this is from your, although we don't have a name on the dear, or your name in it, it's from your Treloar's records.
Yeah, I was actually surprised to see it because, as I think as it's been mentioned already, there was no parental involvement in our treatment at all. None. But even that, it doesn't really tell you a lot, I don't think.
No, let me just read it out so others can follow. So it's dated December 75. It says, "Dear," and then it's a blank. "In view of the problems of hepatitis and haemophilia, I have been asked by Dr. Rosemary Biggs of the Oxford Haemophilia Centre to conduct a survey on this subject. Your son has been selected to receive only cryobuline when he requires transfusing. By limiting him to this type of factor VIII containing material, it will be easier to trace the source should he contract hepatitis. If you have any queries concerning this survey, I would be happy to discuss the matter with you." Do you know whether your parents ever received this letter?
I don't think so, unless maybe I was sent home with it, but I've got no recollection of the letter. I do remember having thought about it last day or two. I do seem to remember them saying, well, you could just use cryobuline. But I thought nothing of it. So I don't quite know. I mean, I might have been sent home that letter, I don't know. But I do remember speaking to my mother some years ago when the campaign started, I think. And I said to her, will you and Dad ever send any letter from the doctors at Treloar talking about my treatment? She said, no.
I'm curious about this. Can we just have a look at the whole letter? There's nothing at the bottom which says, "Do you consent?" There's nothing which asks for consent.
No, and we weren't asked for consent. The point is, we were at school, you see. I mean, the thing about a boarding school is that you're at school, you're away at school all the time. You just do as you're told, mostly. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, you know, they looked after us pretty well. But as regards stuff like this, no, there was nothing consensual. It always bothered me a bit that if we were very poorly in bed with a very bad bleed, they never just rang up your parents and said, just to let you know, he's in bed and we're going to keep an eye on him over the next few days. It just wasn't. And it went further than that. I was quite surprised actually to see a discipline letter that had been sent to somebody in 1978. I've never seen that type of letter. I would have expected one around 1978, 79 when the group went out and got drunk and were grounded. But I've never seen that sort of letter. And also, there was a lot of bullying going on between 1974 and 1977 with some quite serious results. I mean, I had my ear split open by a boy. He got a 50 pence fine. they didn't inform, the school didn't inform my parents, and I didn't, because by the time you get home, you just want to forget things. And then they found out the following term, and I got into more trouble from the house master for not telling them. And he did. He got a 50 pence fine, and I saw him the next day with a smirk on his face.
Can I just bring you back to this this letter?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Would your parents have understood anything about cryobilin as opposed to anything else?
No, I mean, up till then, it had always been. I used to go to Hull Royal Infirmary up to the age of 10, or 11, I think it was, and I would be treated on the paediatric ward there. And the fact the cryoprecipitate was sent over from another hospital, so waiting half a day. But I think the first time they would have become personally aware of the new concentrate was when my brother started home treatment. I mean, he's 4 years younger than me, and he started at 16, same as me. It was the first time it'd been done in Hull. So I think that would have been the first time that they actually saw concentrate. Because, of course, I had what little I had, I would have had at school.
And Nick, if you're right with your recollection that the hepatitis B outbreak was in the autumn term of 1975, in terms of any reference to hepatitis in this letter, is this right? You'd understood that if there was any hepatitis risk, it would be of something that was mild and nothing to be worried about.
Yes. I mean, they would say hepatitis B. But, I mean, we were never told the difference between hepatitis A and B. We didn't know anything about a non-A, non-B hepatitis. We knew nothing about that at all. I don't even know, I'm not even quite sure when that became recognised, even non-A, non-B hepatitis. But now, I do remember at that time, we had a meeting with our MP, and I explained what had happened. I said, we've been promised self-sufficiency and we hadn't received it. And all he said, oh, was it a ministerial promise? He said, well, they're not really worth anything. So, okay. So that was the attitude of the local MP. There was just, it was like, complete apathy about it all. We weren't really aware of, that this is serious. I mean, we didn't know, for example, that with one bottle of Factor 8, we were talking of many, many donors. We didn't know that.
And if we look at the next document, we can see a follow-on in relation to the use of cryobilin. It's TREL 5074_021.
Oh, that's it, yes.
And this is another letter from Dr. Kirk, 27th of February 1976. But this doesn't purport to be to your parents. It's to Dr. Raper, the consultant haematologist at Kingston General Hospital. And it says, Dear Dr. Raper, you were kind enough to cooperate in the hepatitis study by making available cryobilin for the routine treatment of this boy. Unfortunately, over the past few weeks, we've had several severe reactions to this product, and Nicholas, who's not had an anaphylactic type reaction for 3 years, was affected. Because of the seriousness of one of the episodes, I do not think it is advisable to give this product to those boys who reacted to it. I am gradually transferring boys onto haemophil and wonder whether it would be possible for Nicholas to receive this instead of cryobilin. Failing that, perhaps he could be restricted to cryoprecipitate. So it looks as though Dr. Kirk's writing to Dr. Raper so that when you go home in the holidays...
Yeah, the two centres were very good at writing to each other. They just forgot about the patient and the parents.
Do you recall anything about the having an anaphylactic reaction to cryobilin?
No, I don't. I've been trying to rack my brain the last few days, and I don't. I'm sure it probably did happen. I don't know how severe it was. It said some were severe, but it doesn't ring a bell with me. Doesn't ring a bell at all.
And were you aware that you were apparently participating in something called the hepatitis study?
No, I was just asked told to trial cryobilin for the holidays. And I think they actually gave me, I thought that was the holiday that they gave me a supply of cryobilin to take home. obviously that must have been another time if Dr. Raper made it available. But there was another time I seem to remember where I was sent home with some cryobilin, and also I think it was for prophylaxis. I can't remember. It was maybe for prophylaxis, but I do remember being sent home, and I'm sure it was with cryobilin. And because my brother was trained up, he took on very kindly took on the job of doing my injections during the holidays. And I do remember he was doing this, and there was a request for a blood sample to be taken and sent back to the college. And my brother, quite rightly, was a bit wary of doing that, and he rang up, and I think he spoke to Dr. Raper, and I think Dr. Raper said, "Oh yeah, give it a go, see how you get on." I think my brother, bless him, he took a blood sample from me and we put it in the pack, passed it all up and sent it off. But I do remember thinking at the time, that's a bit much.
And I think the episode you're referring to, we've got a document that might refer to that. It's TREL 5074_023.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it, when you're trying to think that.
This is Dr. Raper to Dr. Kirk, October 75. During the summer holidays, Nicholas had 2 forms of treatment. First of all, cryoprecipitate, and that, you've given that on a number of occasions. However, he also had some concentrate given to him by his brother while he was on holiday, and the Sainsbury family have a book in which they keep all their home therapy records.
Yeah, we used to go away on holiday in the caravan, and we'd take some with us and keep it in the little fridge that we had in the caravan. But we also, I remember on a couple of occasions, we used to go down to Wallingford-on-Thames, I think it was, and I do remember on a couple of occasions, because we were both poorly on the same day, we just went down to the Oxford Haemophilia Centre. But yeah, I've got many memories of having the factor 8 in the caravan and my brother doing it for me. I remember doing the boring part, sat there twizzling it to dissolve it all. We both hated doing that. But yeah, I remember that.
And then if we move to 1977 with TREL 5074_020. This is another letter from Dr. Kirk to Dr. Raper in Hull, 11th of March 1977. And we can see in the first paragraph, it refers to you having trouble with elbow joints and being severely infected. And then the recommendation is that you have a limited period of prophylaxis. And if we continue, if we look at the second paragraph, the end of the first paragraph, it says, since the middle of February, therefore, we've treated him prophylactically with 440 units of haemophil on alternate days, which has been fairly successful, and that he's only had 2 elbow bleeds in that time. And then Dr. Kirk asks if it's possible for you to continue with prophylaxis throughout the holidays. Do you recall whether there was any discussion either with you or with your parents about the potential implications of receiving treatment prophylactically rather than on demand?
No, I mean, our only concern at that time, was reducing bleeds. It got the mention of splints, which we use all the time to rest joints. But yeah, they used that, and they would use prophylaxis as well. But it was purely about, stopping or minimising bleeds. And, to be honest, at the time, and even now, I think it was necessary. I went through very prolonged periods of just one bleed after another, alternate elbows. It was like left march almost sometimes.
And did your treatment continue on a prophylactic basis? I think there are references in the documents that suggest that you certainly did have prophylactic treatment after this. Can you recall for how long?
I had periods of prophylaxis whilst I was at Treloar, and I think up during the holidays. And I remember also having it when we went on a school trip to Germany. They fitted it up, fixed things up so I could go along to the hospital in Cologne, the Haemophilia Centre there, and have it there alternate days. That was very well organised. But no, they never sort of said, if you have this, there's a heightened risk of hepatitis. I mean, I think everyone was just thinking about, really, the job at the time was to try and keep our joints going.
And then we can see another document which gives us an indication of the range of products you received. TREL 40221_006, please. We can see that this is a record in relation to you. There's a reference there, frequency alt day, which I imagine is alternative day, and then indication
alternative days, yes.
Prophylaxis for frequent bleeds into both elbows.
Yes.
And I think we can see it's 1980. If we look at then at the table, and we'll just run down the material. So we've got here dates that run from April to May of 1980. So this is just a sample from your records, Nick. And we can see you're getting Lister, Factor 8, Lister. I'm sorry, can we have the whole list, Shemik? Otherwise I'll lose track. Factor 8, Lister, Factor 8, Lister, Cryobulin.
Yeah.
There are other records to similar effect.
Cryobulin, you see, after saying that I shouldn't have it, they still gave me it.
There are other records for other periods of time that you were at Treloar's, which again indicate that you received multiple different types of product. Is that your recollection as well?
Yeah, I think I've said in my statement I received every type of product there was, and I suspect that the reason that was they were trying to get us close unit-wise to what was needed to give the raise that I needed. I think that's why. But, looking back, it's incredible, or it feels incredible, that they didn't try to limit it more to one product. But then on the other hand, you see, there was over 50 of us from all over the country. So, they would have needed a large supply on hand all the time. So they probably had no choice but to get it from different places. That's what I would think.
And then if we look at TREL 40221_018. Again, this is just a sample from your Treloar's records, Nick. And on the left-hand side, we've got the heading serum hepatitis, and we can see reference to antibody and antigen testing. 78 recorded as negative, and then January 79 and April 79, it's recorded as antibody positive, antigen negative, and then it's only the antigen column then filled in. Do you recall anything about testing for any form of hepatitis?
No, I mean, as I remember, at the beginning of each term, they always did blood tests, and I think a large part of it was to make sure that we hadn't developed inhibitors. And I do remember them doing pre and post levels, so they would take a blood sample before you Factor 8, and then a blood sample 20 minutes after you've had it, just to check that they're getting the raise that they want. And I think they were doing that once a term. That's my recollection.
And do you recall ever being told what the results or significance of the results of any of these tests were?
No, I always assumed, they never said there was a problem, so we just assumed that there wasn't a problem. But no, I mean, hepatitis, after that outbreak that I mentioned, it just all seemed to go quiet, never mentioned, really.
And then, just in terms of a final entry from your Treloar's records, if we look at TREL 5074_003, this is a letter 12th of December 1979 from Dr. Wassef, again to Dr. Raper in Kingston. We look at the third paragraph. We can see Dr. Wassef telling Dr. Raper that biochemically his SGOT has been intermittently raised for the past 10 months, his total proteins occasionally raised. Again, was that information ever shared with you or your parents, to your knowledge?
I don't know what it means even now, SGOT. Never been told. never mentioned.
So the picture you're describing, Nick, is very much one of a dialogue between the Treloar Centre and your home centre, but
Yes.
no equivalent or even similar dialogue with you as patient or with your parents as your
No,
parents.
and I think that was a picture that was painted yesterday as well. And I think anybody who gives evidence on Treloar will say the same.
There's a couple of documents which I'm not sure whether we've got available for display. I'm going to call out the name. If we haven't got them, it doesn't matter, Seamus. But TREL 40221_067. We do? Excellent. And we can see if we look at the top of the page, it's an entry in relation to you. Again, this has come from your Treloar's records. There's a date given, 5th of June 1978. But the reason for showing this is we've got there the stamp hepatitis risk.
Yeah.
Is that something you knew about? Is it appearing on any of your records until you saw this?
No, it doesn't ring a bell at all. No. Obviously, when they took blood samples, they just put them straight into the. But no, I don't recall seeing that at all. It doesn't even ring a bell. No.
And then I'm going to try one further document, Seamus, TREL 5074_028. So this just takes us back to 1975. Again, it's a letter from Dr. Kirk to Dr. Raper. And then if we just look at the text of it, and it might help in relation to the issue about hepatitis B. It says, within the last few days, it's come to my attention that 12 patients treated at this centre have been given a material which has proved to be hepatitis B antigen positive by radioimmunoassay testing. The above patient, so that's UNIC, received the material, cryobuline factor 8 concentrate number 09M6575, on the following date, 27th of June 1975. Your patient fortunately has antibody to hepatitis B, and hopefully this will protect him from becoming jaundice. Should he develop symptoms and signs, I would be most grateful if you could arrange for 2 10mm samples of clotted blood to be sent to me for antibody and antigen tests. Now, again, it's a not insignificant piece of information about events going on at the school. Do you know whether that information was ever communicated by Treloar's to your parents?
I don't think so, no. No, as I say, I did ask my mum when we were campaigning. I said, apart from my end of term reports, did you ever get anything medical from the school? And the answer was no. No, we never had anything. I found one copy, blank copy of a letter that may or may not have been sent, but it says, "Dear parent guardian, your son has been placed on a trial of whatever it was. If you have any questions, please contact me." But I've no recollection of my parents mentioning that letter or speaking to me about it. And without further explanation, I don't think they would. I think they would just think he was getting his treatment, he's doing okay. I mean, we're just ordinary, working class, if you like, family. We didn't really know all this. I'm a little bit surprised because I always thought that Dr. Armstein was very open with it, but he never sat down and had this sort of discussion about this stuff with us. Not me, anyway.
And we can take that down. Thank you, Seamus. Now, you then left Treloar's in the summer of 1980.
That's right.
And you were then again under the care of the Kingston Hospital in Hull. And do you know what products you were treated with in the years after you left Treloar's?
Well, I remember Hemophil and Factorate. So it was those two up until everything kicked off, sort of mid-80s. and then they brought in heat-treated factor VIII. I can't remember what brand it was. And then eventually it was a recombinant factor, I forget the name of it now. And now the very latest, longer-lasting stuff.
And did Dr. Raper or any of the other staff at the Kingston General Hospital in Hull tell you at all, in whether in the first part of the 80s or indeed at any time before that, of any risks associated with the use of concentrates?
No. Obviously, we were always aware of the label on the bottle, but they never said anything. To me, no. They never said, there's a bit of a problem with the concentrate. Would you like to go on to cryoprecipitate until it's sorted out? But you see, there again, that would have brought up many, many other difficulties. I mean, I've had so many discussions with my brother with this. He wouldn't have been able to go away to college and do his degree. I would probably have found it very hard to get a job of any sort and work full time. So what do you do?
Now, you were infected with HIV as a result of your treatment, not at Treloar's probably given the time, but your subsequent treatment, and infected with hepatitis C, quite possibly as a result of your treatment at Treloar's. And I'm going to ask you about how you found out about each of those diagnoses. But if we look first of all at a letter you've exhibited to your witness statement, it gives us some dates. Seamus, it's WITN 18502.
Yes, I asked my current doctor, haematologist, to prepare this for me. I found my notes so confusing when I did look through them.
WITN 18402. I'm seeing zeros where there are none.
Yeah, letter dated 14th of June 2018. Is that one?
That's the one. If we go to the next page. So you're absolutely right. It's a letter dated the 14th of June 2018. It's from Dr. Ulsup, your consultant haematologist. And it says, if we go down, following on from your last formal review in the haematology clinic, you asked for information about the dates on which you were found to be infected with hepatitis B, C, and HIV, and the date on which you were told of these infections. I accessed all your old medical records and reviewed the information in them. For hepatitis B, the first positive test result is dated 27th of July 1990. I can find no documentation in case notes stating whether or not you were informed of this result. For hepatitis C, the date of the first positive test is the 13th of July 1990, and in the medical notes, this is first commented on the 21st of September 1993. Again, there's nothing to determine whether or not you were informed of this test result around or earlier. For HIV, the date of the first positive test result is the 17th of August 1989. There is an earlier test for HTLV3, which is an historic name for HIV. There was a positive test result for HTLV3 on the 2nd of July 1986. There was a comment in the records about this test being positive on the 30th of December 1985. Similar to the above two tests, there's no clear documentation as to what dates you were formally informed of these test results. Now, I want to take these in turn, Nick.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And we'll start with the first in time, the HIV HTLV3 results. And we see their reference to there being an HTLV3 test result in July 86 and a comment about positivity in December 85, and then an HIV test in August 89. What's your recollection of how and when you learnt that you had been infected with HIV through your treatment?
Well, what actually happened was I went down for the test. I think it would have been about 1985. And a week or so later, I came home from work, and my dad said that the hospital had rung and that my test was negative. So I thought, great. 2 years later, I needed to go to another hospital for treatment with because more problems with my knee. And I asked the doctor at the time, I think it was Dr. Montgomery, if he would write to them and arrange this. And I got quite annoyed because he kept not doing it. And then I suddenly had a letter from him asking me to go down and see him the next day. And my dad said, I'll take you. And went in. They both confessed there'd been a bit of conspiracy. I had tested positive on the test. But what happened was, my dad said, well, he's living at home with us. He's getting good food. He's living a good lifestyle. He's going to work. Can we at least give him a period of time where he doesn't have to know? And the doctor went along with that. And I think the reason he then had to tell me a couple of years later, because of course we were getting money from the McFarlane Trust, so I think he would have been in trouble over that if he hadn't told me. But also, I had to go to another centre for orthopaedic treatment. And whilst I didn't really blame my dad for trying to help me and trying to protect me, I mean, that's what parents do, I was cross because I'd been in a lot of pain for 6 months. And I said to them, I said, well, that's fine, but you should have told me when I told you that I needed to go to another centre, not just left me to struggle to work. And unfortunately, as my father was there, I didn't say what I really thought. But had I been on my own, I would have said to the doctor, and that's your fault. But he was a particularly apathetic man. He ex-army, and because he dealt with things like leukemia and that, I think he tended to think, well, haemophiliacs, they don't have it so bad, you know, they're all right most of the time. I didn't want very, you know, we got very low doses of factor A, nothing like the strength of doses that we would get, I had at Treloar's, you know, and I tended to bleed longer. So it didn't really do me any good by limiting the factor A. I was positive anyway for HIV, and my joints were worse, so I lost out both ways.
And
yeah, I can understand why my dad wanted to protect me, and my mum. I mean, she was very, very upset by it all. We were hearing about it in the press, and then we saw that the former pupil from Treloar had died, that we both known some years earlier, and there was a particularly graphic picture on telly of him with sores all over his face. I think it was with all that in mind that my dad said, well, let's try and at least give him a bit of an extended holiday from it.
And you said in your statement you weren't sure when you were first informed of your HIV status, but you thought it was after that second test result in 1989. Is that right, or do you think it was earlier?
Let me think. Yeah, because I remember being when I went down to see the doctor with my dad. The other thing that was upsetting was earlier that year I'd got promotion within the civil service and started work at the land registry, which had opened up in Hull. So I had all this suddenly crash on me, just as I was trying to learn a new job as well, and was starting up on learning to drive. So all that dropped on me, and I still had to go to another centre to get orthopaedic treatment for my legs. So it was a no-winner all round.
In terms of your hepatitis C test result, we go back to the first page of this letter. We see there in the third paragraph reference to a positive test on the 13th of July 1990, and then a comment on it in the medical notes in September 1993. What's your recollection of how you learnt about hepatitis C?
Well, firstly, like I think every other haemophiliac who was already HIV positive, I was not informed of my hepatitis C statement until after what became known as the 1991 settlement, where the government settled out of court with us on an ex gratia payment, in return for dropping the legal action at court, but they also included a waiver which said that I agree not to take legal action in the future for any action regarding hepatitis viruses. I remember at the time we were all absolutely furious because we didn't know what was going to happen in the future. We were told we more or less had to sign it. If one person didn't sign it, nobody would get anything, so signed it. And then it's obvious that they knew in 1990 I was positive, and the settlement was in 1991. And it shows that it was casually mentioned to me on that day, and you know about this liver thing that you've got, don't you, hepatitis C? And I think I said no. Yeah, and so we signed away our rights legally, and we were left with another potentially serious infection that we knew nothing about. I mean, it might have been, for example, what they say to me now at the clinic is we recommend that you don't drink any alcohol. Surely that would have been just as relevant then as it is now. So, you know, and we were also told that there was a 5% chance of sexual transmission. I mean, this is all comes down again to the non-intentional infection of partners. So what the hell were they playing at? Playing roulette with our lives, not just our lives, but any sexual partners.
And in relation to hepatitis B, you've said in your statement that the first you learned of a hepatitis B positive result was when you were involved in a class litigation against an American pharmaceutical company in 2003, and you saw your medical records.
Yeah, I saw the claim form that they were putting in, and I rang up to query it. I said, I didn't know about it. And they said, well, it does say in your notes that you are hepatitis B positive. So I said, oh, fair enough, then just include it. But I don't know that within the settlement we've got anything for it. I mean, the settlements, I think the settlement. Also, I'm thinking about the settlement with the drug companies a few years later. I don't know that there was an amount included for hepatitis B. If there was, it would have been very little, because they gave very little for hepatitis C infection. I think the total award, I think it turned out at something like 22,000, and that was after more than 10 years of fighting. I mean, we were told it would be £200,000 we'd get, and it would take a couple of years. It took 10 years, and we got 20,000. But as to how that was broken down, we were never told.
Now, I want to ask you, so we can take that down, Shamik. I want to ask you about how your physical health then developed over the following years. You said in your statement that for the first...
Were you going to deal with hepatitis B?
Hepatitis B? Yes, I just did, sir.
I thought it was hepatitis C. That was
No,
hepatitis B.
no,
Sorry.
it was the hepatitis B. The question was in relation to hepatitis B.
Thank you.
And in relation to hepatitis C, I think, Nick, you as you said, you were just told casually you've got this liver thing.
Yeah.
And the record suggests that the first mention in the medical notes was in July 1990, which there's no mention at any stage of the significance of the antibody positive tests taken at Treloar's.
No, not as far as
No, and they were positive back then, so I don't quite know what's happened there. I can only assume that he didn't have access to my Treloar notes. I think that's probably why, in fairness to him, because obviously my Treloar notes were separate. When I needed a copy of my Treloar notes for the American litigation, I rang up the school and they still had them and they sent me a copy. But when I needed them now for the inquiry, I rang up and I was told a bit officiously, oh, we wouldn't keep that sort of thing here. That's part of the NHS, and the centre was very different, not connected to the school and all this. I said, well, I've rung you before, all right, some years ago, and you had them all on site then. And I've spoken to two supervisors about this, and he said, we definitely don't have them. So I just said, thank you very much, and ended the call. But then I've been sent them anyway. So it was just a matter really of not knowing where they had been sent to.
Thank you.
Now, you talked in terms of your physical health, of everything, and this is from your statement, being fine for the first few years, and you began to hope that that would remain the case.
Yeah.
But then you began to experience night sweats and then infections in mouth, tongue, and throat.
Yeah. And I knew when I started getting the night sweat, because they'd been asking me regularly at clinic, have you had any night sweats? I was saying no. What are you talking about? And then they started happening, and it was 2 or 3 times a night, and I was scared. I didn't tell my mum and dad. I didn't want to be changing sheets every night, and my mum worrying, so I just put up with it. And then I think my first actual infection was candida thrush in the mouth. I thought, when I sweat, oh God, have I got rabies, sort of thing. So I went along to the haemophilia centre. He said it was thrush, and they just gave me some drops to put in my mouth. But that was very long, quite a long process. There was no tablet given, antibiotic. It was quite unpleasant.
And you developed sores over your face at one point?
Herpes, facial herpes, yeah, had that. But we think that might have been down to one of the drugs I was given, because I was taken off it when that happened. Because they also tested my hemoglobin. My hemoglobin was very low. I remember I was, my chest was hurt, and I found it very hard to move around. I told them, so I had red cells for that, I think, and treatment for herpes. I was in for 2 weeks to treat one and then the other. Yeah. So.
And then you've explained in your statement that by 1996, your overall health was severely compromised, leading to you having to give up what you describe as your dream job in 1997.
Yeah, both my knees had declined very badly by this point. My left knee, which had been bad since the age of 10, that was fixed and painful. And my right leg, which had always been very strong, the knee was in terrible shape. In fact, I had them both replaced, and the right one I had done first because it was more painful, and they said it was 3/4 gone. And it was the most excruciating thing that I've ever been through, and that's saying a lot. And then I developed a huge lump on the side of my knee, which I had for 2 years. I think what happened was the drain got blocked. They put a drain around. I suspect that the drain got blocked and all the blood just builds up. I don't know why otherwise it would just go like that. So I had that for 2 years. Then I had the infection of cellulitis. And I think I said jokingly to the doctor, I said, "Oh, I'm not going to lose my leg, am I?" And he said, "Well, I don't know yet." That shook me a bit. And then I had the left knee done a few months later, and they said it was quite a difficult operation. There was very little room to get it in. And it took me a very long time to get mobile. I mean, I did all the physio and that was excruciating. But by that time, my HIV symptoms were getting worse. I just felt ill in myself. I didn't really know why. And I went back to work, and after about a month, the welfare came up to me and said, "Look," she said, "you're going downhill by the day. What's wrong?" She said, "We can all see weight's almost dropping off you on a weekly basis." And I just, "Well, just give me a bit of time." I said, "I'm sure everything will be all right." And then about a week later, a union official came up to me in the corridor and said, "Nick, I'd better tell you this." He said they're looking to start taking disciplinary action against you because of your sick leave record. I said, "Oh, thanks very much for telling me." So I just went home and sat and typed out a letter and applied for early retirement on medical grounds and took it. I took the letter in, and I didn't go back to work.
And you said in your statement that up until this point in time, I think your HIV care had been delivered through your haemophilia centre. but your family became so concerned about your physical condition that your brother called the hospital and demanded that you see an AIDS specialist, and it was only then that you were given antiretroviral treatment for the first time.
Yeah. And I found out it had been available for 2 years. I mean, previously, all they'd given me at the haemophilia centre was this tablet that supposedly would give you some protection against pneumocystitis, which is an infection of the lungs, which was a very common infection for HIV, probably one of the first major ones, and people were dying of it. So I was taking a great big chalk-like tablet each day. But then when, as I say, I deteriorated suddenly, and my brother said to me, he said, we thought you'd had a stroke. I was acting very strangely. I was very, very weak. I could hardly move. We got to the AIDS clinic, and the doctor said, oh, you've come just in time. He said, your CD4 count's 17, and your viral load was God knows how many thousands. But I'd already spoken to the haematology doctor, and he said, we're going to send you there if you have an infection you can't handle. So I made a formal complaint against him. I mean, it could have cost me my life. And the reply that the hospital gave me was that they had interviewed Dr. Raper, and they claim that I said that because I had a rough time during a course of hepatitis C treatment, that I didn't want anything for HIV. Well, that was plainly ridiculous. And even if I had said that at the time, why didn't you say, well, look, I think you really ought to consider it? He told me that I was at the point where I could be getting serious infections, but he didn't suggest to me again, look, I think you ought to consider treatment or see the specialist. And his reply was that I'd turned it down because I had a bad time with hepatitis C treatment. I could have been on treatment for 2 years. I was absolutely furious. He just got away with it.
And in terms of the treatment for hepatitis C, you underwent treatment with interferon and ribavirin. What were you told by the consultant in advance were the likely side effects of that treatment?
Oh, that was Dr. Montgomery. Now, don't be silly. You only last for a few days. Sorry, that's how he spoke. Wait a minute. He just said, basically you might feel rough for a few days, but that's it. But after I've been taking it a while, I felt tired all the time. And then I got really, really depressed. I was just sat there in floods of tears. And I went along to my next appointment, and I saw Dr. Shields, who just started taking over from Dr. Montgomery. He said, you've got chronic clinical depression, and it's the interferon that's causing it. So he started me on antidepressants, and I improved, but I didn't clear the virus. And then a couple of years later, he said, would like to try again, put me on antidepressants again. I went through a second course of treatment, and I was lucky it cleared. I was a bit surprised, but it cleared. So, but obviously, nobody knows what long-term damage has been done from infection.
And do you continue to have your liver monitored?
Yes, I do. In fact, I haven't been well lately, and I spent a few days in the hospital with this lymphedema that I got from cellulitis. And, they did a load of tests then. And one doctor said to me, oh, it's because of your hepatitis C, it's damaged, you've got liver damage, and that affects the proteins that are produced, that your lymphatic system needs. And I thought I was a bit surprised because my latest scan, which was only a few months earlier, it said everything fine. In fact, the scores for fibrosis had actually gone down a bit, and all my blood tests were fine. So I thought that's a little bit strange. And then when I spoke to another doctor, he said, well, you've shielded for a year, and then there's everything else that you've been through that year. He said, probably stress, and the fact that you were sheltering. He said, you've had astronomical bad luck. And I'm waiting for more tests to be done at the moment. and I'm waiting for an urgent cancer biopsy that was supposed to be done within the fortnight, and that's a month ago now. So yeah, it seems, if they're right, that the hepatitis C has now led to severe lymphedema. So I can't go outside the house at the moment, can't wear shoes and socks. It's very painful. So I've swapped the pain of a bleed once a week for this. Yeah.
Nick, were you ever offered counselling or psychological support over the decades?
No. A friend did come forward recently because he'd heard about things that happened to me from March of last year. And he said, well, I'm working for the Terence Higgins Trust. And he said they're very good. Why don't you just talk to them? I had a chat with a trauma counsellor, very, very nice lady. And I just said, I've heard of people having counselling for, I don't know, a terrorist attack or a car crash or something, one serious event. I said, but really, how are you meant to cope when it's just one serious event after another? And she said to me, having gone through everything that happened, she said, you cannot go through a life like that without being very severely traumatised. So yeah, she's helped a little bit. Problem is, with all these things, it's time. Last year was particularly hard. I went on holiday to Cape Verde with my friend. He was also my support worker. He had what we thought was a bit of a cold. We flew out there, and after a few days, he started to go downhill. And of course, the pandemic was, if you like, crashing down all over the world. We took him to get medical attention 2 days before we came home. He was taken into hospital. I was isolated in my bedroom, hotel room for 4 days. I tested positive for COVID, he did. But when I was reunited, he was just laid on a bed, hooked up to oxygen, couldn't walk. And I think I was there 2 days. I think they said he was stable and he should get better. And then one night he just suddenly died. And it was during a power blackout. And then I said he repatriated. They buried him straight away. So I was there another 5 days. I had the haemophilia centre help. I contacted my local MP, who contacted the local officials, the Foreign Office, and I was given priority on the air ambulance. So it started on the Monday with them and the help of my lovely brother Philip and his wife Jackie. I was back home on Friday the 29th. Died on the 23rd, which is when lockup started here. The last thing he said to me was, don't worry, we'll get through this together, Nick. We'll rebuild our lives. And I thought, oh, he'll be fine in a few days. So positive. And then he just went. So it was pretty horrendous. And then, of course, it was straight into shielding. And I think that's partly what's led me to this point. So it's been pretty tough. No, I mean, we learn to be self-reliant and tough and resilient, but we shouldn't have to be. You shouldn't have to survive in life. You should be able to thrive in life. And that's what we've lost. Of course, too many have lost their lives, but that's the position that we're in.
Nick, I'm just going to ask you next a little about your experience of the financial support or financial assistance trusts and schemes. You've explained in your statement you received grants from the McFarlane Trust from time to time. And then you've talked in your statement more generally about the trust and schemes not always being helpful or approachable. What was your general experience of interaction with them?
Well, when the McFarlane Trust was set up and we'd had the initial £20,000, all the haemophilia acts had £20,000, and they set up this very nice charity, made us charity cases. And I think the payments was something like £80 a month in the day. when it all started. But you could apply for grants. I mean, first thing I applied for was a really nice armchair for my joints and everything, and it was turned down because I didn't have any AIDS symptoms. So I didn't apply for anything more for quite a long time. But then, as time went on, I heard of other people getting grants. What was wrong? I started to apply for things, driving lessons, mobility car deposit. And it wasn't too bad. It was a bit of a faff filling out the forms and having to get the receipts. Oh, fair enough, but it was always a bit vague what they would and wouldn't pay for. And I had they paid 1 year for me to have a course of complementary therapy, £200. And I asked the following year for the same. What is this complementary therapy? We know nothing about it and all this. And I tried to explain. They also mentioned that, I was due my next mobility car, and would I still be able to get £1,000 towards a deposit? And the lady I was speaking to, she didn't speak very good English. I'm afraid to say I got a bit raspy. I said, I just can't cope with this. It's ridiculous. I said, forget it. Put the phone down, went out. When I came back, my mum said, a lady's just rung me up and said, your son has been very rude to one of her staff. I said, what? He actually rung my mother up and spoken to her as if I was at school. Which I thought was ridiculous. Anyway, I just went ahead and put the application in, and I got the money, got the grant. But, what a battle it was at times. I applied for some new double glazing, and also for the cost of redecorating a room that hadn't been done in many years. And they sent me the money, double glazing, and I wrote back and said, would you please tell me what you are including the decorating? And I got rather a short reply saying, we paid you your middle quote on the on your new windows. That should be enough for someone. It was always like that. It just wasn't really a pleasant experience. Some of it was routine, but wasn't particularly pleasant sometimes.
You've made this general observation in your statement, Nick. You say this, I feel that we've been made to fight for every penny for a period of 30 years, whilst at the same time we've watched people die without receiving any support at all.
Exactly right.
You talked in your statement about the involvement in campaigning. I think in contrast with in the early years after you were infected, when you decided to sort of carry on and keep things within the family and so on, and not get involved in campaigning.
Yeah.
And then in more recent years, I'm sorry, I talked to Chris.
Yeah. We made a decision, shell down, nobody outside the family knew, but we heard horrific stories over the years of people who had started campaigning. They had their cars vandalised with AIDS written on it. They had it daubed on their house doors, the windows. They were jeered at in the street. One woman came back from burying her husband to find AIDS lives here scrawled all over the front of the house and things like that. I've heard stories of one man having to be rescued from his own home by his GP and the police because people had formed a barrier outside and wanted him out. And then you've already heard about what happened to the boys that were actually at Treloar at the time, that there were journalists hanging around. They couldn't even just go down to the village shop and get some sweets without a journalist following them, asking them for an interview. Outrageous. And it wasn't out of concern, it was just sensationalism press. They were calling us things like ticking time bombs. Just awful. We were just, people who've been given a treatment that was supposed to enhance our lives. It was killing us. and we've been treated by the media and society as if we were evil.
And then in more recent years, you have become involved in campaigning. You told us in your statement that you had meetings with government, with trusts, with MPs, and you've also tried to put questions and obtain answers from government. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah. As I say, I started getting involved, I think, about 15 years ago. It was when Tainted Blood, I think, first started up. And also, I went to a meeting in the Lake District, which was to discuss the American litigation. And that's when that started. So, yeah, it's all come from that. I mean, I can't remember the number of times I've gone down to London or Manchester or Leeds, and everyone's so sorry that all this happened, and they want to do the right thing, and we're searching for a solution. And Milton said, and then when she retired, Nancy we took her around Milton. Why have these schemes not been reformed yet? Outrageous. Well, she didn't do it. It's just been like that. They've just all passed the parcel. It's been 30 years of pass the parcel. And we only got the inquiry because, of course, Theresa May messed up her election campaign and ended with a minority government because she'd refused as one before, as had every other Prime Minister. So it was a political error on their behalf. They've got to see her. I also think the fact that it was Grenfell Tower happened at almost exactly the same time that we were asking. She felt she couldn't do one without the other. But yeah, it's been a very long and hard campaign. I mean, I remember going down to London once a few years ago, and we hired a hearse with it coffin in it, and we had a message for the Treloar boys on the side. And on the back, we had a picture of a young boy, Colin, who died, I think, aged 7 or something. He was our poster boy. And we had this going all around London, and then it stopped, and we did press interviews, walked behind it for a few hundred yards. I remember all that. Went down to Whitney, where David Cameron was Prime Minister, and protested outside his office. We walked through central London with banners. It's just been endless. We met with a government facilitator, I think 6 years ago, and he was going to report to government what he wanted, and then we never really heard, I don't think we heard another thing about it. So it's been a really tough fight, and every increase that we've got, I think we've had to scratch it out of government, scratch it out of their eyes openers.
Nick, the last thing I was just going to ask you about is this, or really ask you if you want to tell us about something. There was a photo, I think, in the Sunday Times recently, which I think was a photo of yours.
Yes,
I'm hoping we've got it to put up on screen. RLIT 40664, Shomik. They've been sent in the course of Nick's evidence. And if we go to the next page, should be the next one. There we are.
Yes.
If we zoom in on the photo.
It's a very, very powerful photo. It was taken, we went on a school trip to Canada, as I think I mentioned, and for the weekend, a local family who had 2 sons with haemophilia invited the 5 of us who had haemophilia to join them on their annual holiday. They had a cabin by Lake Ontario in the forest, and it was nice. And we spent the weekend with them. That photo was actually taken on my 16th birthday. So it's very powerful. As you can see, I'm the only one left. And the fact that we're looking at this today is particularly poignant. The boy in the middle, he was one of my best friends down there, and his birthday was he was exactly a week older than me. We went right the way through school together. He was, I think, one of the first people I spoke to. I saw him looking upset. He had his arm in a sling. And I don't know where we're supposed to go and get treatment here. So I went with him to find out and chatted. He was from Lewisham, and his mum was widowed. He had, like me, had a brother who was 4 years older. So we had quite a lot in common. And I found out, I think it was from Caroline Wheeler, I asked if she could find out for me. He died at the age of 32.
Nick, can I
you
just stop you
pause
for a moment? Could we just stop the transcript?
Yes.
Nick, I'm just conscious that you're potentially sharing information about people.
Oh, no, I'm not naming anybody.
No, I know, but we have the photos, so if you don't mind.
But it speaks for itself. I mean, a picture paints 1,000 words, doesn't it? But it's just probably one of the most poignant photos that I'll ever see, I think. And I didn't look at it for years and years, and then I just found it one day. And I suddenly realised, God, I'm the only one left. You know, it shocked me. And that's when I started using it for, to put faces to people who are no longer here.
And thank you for sharing it with us, Nick. We'll take it down. I just want to check the transcript is up and running again. I think it probably is. Nick, if you just wait there for a moment, I'm going to turn to Mr. Snowden, who represents you, and see if there's anything further
It's active.
It is, that he would wish me to ask you. No. Sir Brian, do you have any questions for Nick before I ask him to add anything he would like to?
No, I don't. I just have one question for you, actually, but Nick may be able to comment. I don't know. Can we go back to TREL 40221_018? This really arises out of two things in Nick's evidence. One is his recollection of the nurse saying, or the headmaster saying, you don't worry about all the hepatitis you've got, because there are two types. One is fatal and serious, the other is not fatal and mild, and you've got the mild one.
Yeah.
There's only room in this form for one form of hepatitis, because it has to have an antibody and antigen test at the time. And there was no antigen and antibody test for non-A, non-B at any time during the 1970s. So this has to relate to hepatitis B.
Yeah.
Is there any other form which might have recorded any symptoms similar to this, of which the inquiry is aware, which relate to non-A, non-B?
So the only documents that we've seen in the records that would be relating to that potentially are the ongoing liver function tests in their various manifestations. There is nothing that expressly refers in any of Nick's records from Treloar's to non-A, non-B hepatitis.
So as far as we know, there was no systematic record of whether pupils might be suffering in the same way as there was for hepatitis B.
Nothing that we've seen. There are other similar documents, slightly different format, but talking about serum hepatitis. But again, they're divided into the antibody and antigen testing and are clearly related to hepatitis B.
Yes, thank you very much. That's all that I wanted to ask, Nick, and you'll understand, I think, why I ask it, because of your very clear recollection.
Nick, is there anything that you would like to say?
Yeah, I'd just like to say a few words about Treloar. There were many positive things about it. I mean, we've got the education that we wouldn't have got. We've got the treatment that we wouldn't have got. got the opportunity to do things I would never have been able to do at home. But when I joined in 1974, it was, a very harsh, if you like, regime. It wasn't very personal. You're away from home 66% of the year. It was a bit earning, surnames used only. All of us hated that. It was cold, institutional, no warmth. The housemasters tend to be ex-military and a few years away from retirement. And I just don't think they could really cope or knew how to tackle issues like bullying. And this is relevant because the serious incidents of bullying that I both endured and witnessed were serious and would have used a massive amount of factor eight. I won't name, one boy labelled gay, he ran away, never came back. My housemaster, he ran away all the way home, all on his own. And I said, good for him, sir, and walked on. But there was nothing he ever said, we're so sorry that a pupil has gone through this. Another example, I was attacked from behind once. My glasses were punched right through my ear, so you can imagine the amount of factor eight needed for that. The boy concerned got a 50-pence fine. But I've always thought things like that, shouldn't parents have been notified, and the boy's parents, things like that. I won't read any more examples. They talk about consent, they talk about communicating, and there was just nothing. I was particularly embarrassed because I didn't tell my mum and dad, because by the time you get home from the boarding school, it's another world. You want to put it behind you. And unfortunately, my dad accompanied me back the next term and decided to have a chat with the housemaster. And the housemaster was very embarrassed that he didn't know about it. And he moaned at me for the rest of the term and told everybody else. And I thought, well, why didn't you pick up the phone and say, I'm sorry that your son who was in my care has had a serious injury and that I was sufficiently punish the boy? Nothing was said. He was given a 50-pence fine and went off. And I saw him laughing the next day. That's taught him nothing. It's cost a massive amount of factor eight. And I would think that bullying and fighting must have consumed an awful lot of factor eight. The headmaster said we banned football in 1978. And I remember that happening. And I had a conversation with my housemaster. And I was trying to say to him, you're just using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. They want to do things like send us to bed after supper if we had a bleed. So if we had a slight elbow bleed, we had to go to bed at 7:30 as if we were punished. So I had a big row with him about that. I said, well, you're just not tackling the right things. As regards to what I'd like to actually say, the story of Treloar and the grim deaths of 70 plus former students who were killed by contaminated factor eight, which was intended to enhance their lives. It's a tragedy within the tragedy of the contaminated blood scandal in this country. The lives of those who died is commemorated in a beautifully designed stained glass window within the chapel at the school. And those of us who have survived continue our campaign for truth and justice. Our story has featured in the Sunday Express, the Mail on the Sunday, the BBC, Sky, and our efforts continue on this story, along with all the other many aspects of the disaster. I do wish to make clear that none of us apportion any blame to the medical staff at the school. We were always supportive and made every effort to look after us all. We believe that Treloar was singled out for non-consensual trials of previously untested factor eight concentrate without parental consent and really without our consent. and we look to you, the inquiry team, to uncover the truth of what happened. We hope that we get not only answers to those questions, but the answers to all of the many, many issues that have been raised by the contaminated blood scandal. We have already waited 30 years, and far too many have died. Their time has run out. Justice delayed is justice denied. When talking about the effects of the contaminated blood tragedy, it's only natural to focus on our families and friends, countless others who had their lives blighted. I must pay tribute to one of them. One was a haemophiliacs at the Lord Mayor's College at Alton in Hampshire, who helped look after approximately 90 haemophilia boys, including myself. Her compassion and care in her work of infusing and caring for us when we had a bleed, and her patience when training us to self-infuse factor VIII and to look after ourselves more independently, won a special place in all our hearts. I was therefore saddened to hear some years ago that following her much-deserved retirement, she was reluctant to accept visits from her former boys because she felt a terrible weight of guilt for injecting us with contaminated factor VIII. None of us blamed her or any of the other medical team at Treloar's. We all loved her, and I was relieved to hear from another Treloar boy who had managed to visit her a few times before her death and put her mind at rest. I have never been offered any counsel or psychological support. I believe I would have found it useful to have somebody independent to talk to in the early days when I feared my life. I sought my own support in many ways. I joined the Body Positive group. I'm now at a point in my life where I've lived with it for so long and lived through so much that I feel I have enough support in my brother and the people I talk to online and social media, although I did lose my best friend Andy last year, and the loss of his support has been devastating. I can just have a thank you to do. I'd like to dedicate my evidence to my late parents, Molly and Brian, who have travelled so much of this terrible journey with me, with nothing other than unconditional love and support. I would also like to dedicate to the boys of the Lord Mayor's College, who were infected as young men and who, by the time they left school, had unknowingly lived half of their natural lifespan due to this dreadful catastrophe. Out of 89 haemophilia boys who attended the school, I am one of only 16 left. This story is as much theirs as is mine. And I would just like to end by thanking my brother Philip and Jackie for their support since our mum died, particularly the last year in getting me home from Cape Verde and looking after me. I'd like to thank all the doctors and nurses who looked after me, the physiotherapist at Treloar who got me walking again, the speech therapist who helped me to learn to talk after my palate operation. I had no upper teeth. And finally, I'd like to thank you, Sir Brian, you and your inquiry team, your dedication, hard work, and compassion, which is far more infinite than the compassion that has been shown to many of the people who have been supposed to have looked after us over the years. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Nick. Did you hear that? A round of applause for you.
Oh, no, I didn't actually, sorry.
I wondered if you'd heard it.
No,
but
never mind.
It follows from your description, which none of us, I think, will forget. Many of us will have thought of, perhaps, of the Treloar story as a tragedy within a tragedy, and you've given it colour. But particularly, can I just thank you for giving us your evidence when you have told us, reading from between the lines of what you've said, that you are unwell, when today, by chance, is the day when Andy would have had his birthday, and he's obviously a very, very sad loss. And these things make it particularly difficult, I have no doubt, to give evidence. So thank you very much indeed for that.
Thank you.
So if we take a break now, and then if we might trespass on people's lunchtime, with the next witness, I would, if possible, like to finish his evidence in one go, which might mean a late lunch, and then we can have the afternoon for our third witness, who yesterday we erroneously identified as anonymous, but is in fact Mr. Gary Bennett.
Well,
Mr. John Peach next, and then Mr. Gary Bennett.
Yes, we won't squeeze the coffee break any more than we need to. So it'll be 12:05. We'll start, and I suspect that we may anticipate lunch probably round about 1:30 thereabouts. But we'll see how
Something
it goes.
like that. We'll take as much time as we need.
Well, obviously, we won't rush his evidence. Very well. 12:05.